All right, amigos, here we are. Like I said, I'm starting a new series. The title is The Earth is Flat. How do you know? You so I was with some distant relatives, and one of a young person, I'd say maybe 6 or 7, um, we were having a conversation, and my daughter was present, and my daughter had drawn a picture. And he said, "What's that?" And my daughter said, "That's the Earth." He's like, "No, it's not. The Earth is flat." I thought, this is going to be interesting. And he proceeded to ask, he was a very uh, quick-witted kid, to take a brief survey of those who were present who thought the Earth was flat. And no one, although I remained undecided, just for the sake of arguments, for the sake of argument. And he said, "Now don't," this is my favorite part, he said, "Now don't look on your phone because it's going to tell you lies." And I thought to myself, he's right. And on the one hand, this was a somewhat disorienting and disturbing experience for me, just to think about this kid, small boy, essentially believing whatever he was told, just like you when you were a kid, and just like you right now, a lot of the time. And how would you know anyway? And of course, what does it matter, you might say? Although it probably does matter. But what do we mean by such a thing? And then my wife was telling me that she read this book called Educated. Maybe you've seen it. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list the past year. It's a memoir. And it's about it's a life story of a woman, she's 27 now, who grew up in Utah. No, Idaho. And in a Mormon family, kind of a fundamentalist family. And she did not go to school because the government can't be trusted. And if you're a Mormon, that's a fact. If you know anything about Mormon history, they were pursued and killed and driven out to the West. So that's a fact from their point of view. The government can't be trusted, all the way down to the education system. Not for everybody, but she was admittedly in the far corners of her own faith, I suppose, her family was, in terms of their own fundamentalist perspectives. And she went to college. She told this story. I listened to this interview. She went to college, and 17, 18 years old, and the professor was talking about the Holocaust, and she raised her hand and asked, "What is the Holocaust?" Had never heard the word in her life. The professor thought she was joking, kind of like thought maybe she was like a Holocaust denier, and says that you can't talk like that in my class, and moved on. But she genuinely meant, what does that word mean? I have no idea what you're talking about. So I want to talk today about, I want to try to talk about truth. And what is it? And how do we discover it? And I want to talk about conspiracy theories, like the Earth is flat. Why do we go in for such things? And I know you're thinking, well, not me. But how do you know? One of my friends is a professor at ASU. He teaches philosophy, and he's an analytic philosopher, which is the worst kind. And I remember when he was in graduate school, he would just sometimes, we'd have all these deep conversations, meaning I couldn't really hang on. But anyway, he would say, "Do you have any false beliefs?" Now, who would admit they have false beliefs? First of all, how would you know if you possessed false beliefs? Most of us would say, "I don't possess false beliefs," because if I did, I'd just swap them out for beliefs that were not false. But I guarantee you, right now, in this room, all of you have false beliefs. You just don't know what they are yet. That's part of human nature, to have false beliefs. And we look down our nose at things like the Earth is flat. We say, how silly. Last time I was up in space, I saw that it was round. You are still dependent on information that you did not mine yourself, correct? So what is it about conspiracy theories? And so that's what I've been thinking about the last few weeks. And also, so I'm on a couple of rabbit trails I want to go down right now. Let's talk about fake news. Because that is a very interesting phrase. I don't know if Trump invented it, but he certainly brought it into the mainstream parlance. I don't remember even really thinking about fake news before Trump's rise to power. Maybe it's out there. You can, let me know later. But it's an interesting phrase. What does it mean? Like, there's an NPR show, and they're always saying the host is always saying, if it's fake, it's not news, which is a fine. I mean, it's a little phrase. And we live in a culture of little phrases. That's his little phrase. But it's still, I find the notion interesting. What is meant by fake news? And isn't it true that over the course of time, things that come across your news feed are sometimes over time false? Wouldn't you agree with that? Say, not my news feed. Yes, your news feed, everybody's. Because that's the way things happen, especially in an instantaneous culture where, boom, it's up, it's on the ticker, and immediately it's seen as the truth because it's coming as a news source, and over time we get a little disillusion. And you might say on the right and the left, I think this is true, all of us are a bit concerned and disillusioned with what comes across as news. Wouldn't you agree? We don't know really what to make of it. The thing that I find most interesting about the phrase fake news is that the phrase isn't, it's false. Like, that would be one thing. Like, that's a false story. But that's not what's used. Fake news is, so what is fake news doing? In my opinion, the phrase plants seeds of doubt, which you already possess if you're a thinking person in the first place. You tend to doubt whatever is just handed to you, at least some of the time. Wouldn't you agree with that? So to say it's fake is not the same thing as saying it's false. It just uses those seeds of ambiguity to sort of wrap you into its orbit. Yeah, maybe this is. How would we know anyway? Or alternative facts. We say, how silly. But facts, over time, they morph, they change. You wouldn't have a computer in your pocket if people didn't change their minds about things over time, correct? So, what is going on when it comes to truth? And I think what Trump means by fake news is what I might call inconvenient facts. Really? Don't you think? They're just inconvenient. And we don't know to the extent to which he knows they're false. I mean, it's just like my question, do you know you have false beliefs? Well, you don't really know you possess false beliefs. And that's the tricky thing with him, because nobody can peer into his mind to know if it's an obvious denial of truth or if he tends to believe his own fantasies, which is possible. Because I've believed my own fantasies. It's not that, just like falling in love with someone and thinking they love you, that's called a fantasy. When all of a sudden you realize they don't. Okay, all right, so I was under a false belief, and I believed it passionately, and I knew that it was true, except it wasn't. So inconvenient facts is kind of what I think is going on with a word like fake news. And like I said before, I think it casts just enough doubt. And by the way, I can't help it because of my religious background. I've been thinking from time to time about the 10 Commandments. One of them is, do not bear false testimony. which is the definition of the current administration, bearing false testimony. And I think it's so interesting that almost wholesale, and it's not true, but many Christians, particularly, support the administration that breaks regularly one of the 10 commandments. That I find interesting. Now, if you are not a Republican or on the right, don't be so self-righteous. Don't you think the left also bears false testimony? Of course. Of course. So and this is a genuine question. What happens to a society? And I'm not like saying we should, put the 10 commandments up out in front of the community center or something like that. But what happens to a society that no longer holds that as a value? Telling the truth. That's really all that is trying to say. Do not bear false testimony. Tell the truth. That's what it's trying to say. What happens to a society that decides that's not important? Or that's a matter of opinion? Or there can be alternative truths? What happens to a society over time? Well, you're looking at it. Really, you're looking at it. We don't value that. Because what's happening with fake news, I think, is that we've decided that ideology, my worldview, if you want to put it more simply, is the right one. Or my group's ideology is the right one. Therefore, anything that does not run through the rubric of my ideology is wrong, is fake. That is a very dangerous world. Because what does it subjugate itself to? It doesn't. Because the ideology, the group, has already decided we possess the truth, at least enough of the truth, as compared to everybody else. So it doesn't matter. Have you ever been in an argument with someone that believes something that seems kind of outrageous, like a flat earth? And have you realized that facts, just the presentation of information, doesn't change? People aren't like, oh my God, you're right. I never thought about that before. That is not what happens 99% of the time. And it's probably not what happens to you either. Let's say you had some position that you held passionately, and I presented some alternatives that challenged that, or the very premises of that. You would probably instinctually say, that's not true. I don't accept that. Correct? Or are you like super rational, like your superhuman strength is just complete rationality, and you're like, I have taken that into consideration, I have changed my position on the spot. Probably not. And here's another thing I've been thinking about with the Trump administration, and this is probably true of all administrations, but it's more blatant with the Trump administration. There's a lot of talk now about loyalty, which is a very interesting word, because anyone who goes against Trump from the inside, I don't mean the Democrats, I mean those who are on the inside realm of whatever he represents, if they break from that, they are disloyal. And loyalty itself, the etymology, has to do with law. Okay? So to be disloyal is to violate the law. The question, whose law? And the law comes from the king. That's where the word comes from. The origin of that way of putting things is that the king makes the laws, and you subjugate yourself to the king. That's called loyalty. And anyone, it wasn't all that long ago, who's disloyal has their head cut off. So do you have psychological reason to be loyal? You better believe it if you want to keep your head. So that's, and again, back to my question about what is happening to the truth. See, in a society that says do not bear false testimony, or we would like to, as much as possible, subjugate ourselves to the truth, breaks the loyalty codes. Because then, what must you be loyal to becomes the truth rather than a single person. That's the experiment of American democracy, by the way. Will it work? That's the question at hand. Will it work? We're gonna subjugate ourselves to a series of ideas, and I realize ideas can morph and change, and facts that aren't dependent upon a single human being. That's why we have what we call checks and balances. And that's the thing that we all know is being called into question. And you can hear it with words like fake news and loyalty. What happens to a society? So, my question is something like, why are we like this? Why are we like this? And I made a list of the top conspiracy theories. Would you like to hear them? Some of you might get curious and be like, wait a minute, that might be true. So among the biggest are 9/11 is an inside job. We're not talking about 100 people believe this. We're talking about tens of thousands of people. It's an inside job. And you're like, oh, that's ridiculous. Start using your phone. And pretty soon you'll be like, wait a minute. Princess Diana was murdered. Couldn't be an accident. Subliminal advertisements, huge in the conspiracy theory community. The moon landing, that's my personal favorite. We didn't land on the moon. Hey, how do you know? Were you there? You know, there it is. I mean, you can't say, I know for sure they landed on the moon. Really? You can say that for sure. All right. So that one's definitely not a conspiracy. That's called facts. Here's another one. Paul McCartney died in 1966. Okay, and now they have like a stunt double, I guess. And how do you know? You've not met him. Of course, John F. Kennedy, there are actually several different streams feeding into that. Roswell, you know, aliens, that they're covering up essentially a crash site in Area 51. The Holocaust, one of the more recent, that's what's interesting about it, recent and disturbing conspiracy theories. What else do we have? Oh, there's something that I found called the Protocol of Elders. It came out in Russia in 1910. And it was written as basically an anti-Semitic document that said the Jews were planning to take over the world. That's 1910. Not written by Jewish people, spread around the world, and was a big contributor to World War II. So these things have a life of their own. Big one in the 80s, I remember satanic cults. Like everything was a satanic cult, you know, like watch out on Halloween because there would be razor blades in candy bars, and they try to abduct children and do experiments on satanic cults. Which seems kind of funny, you know, like, anyway, I'm not going to go down that path. Here's a good one, Big Pharma. Okay, loads of conspiracy theories that the big pharmaceutical industries are covering up the truth. And is there some evidence of that? That's the problem with conspiracy theories. See, a lot of you are like, well, that one's true. All right. All medicines, you are alive, most of you, because of Big Pharma. I am not making that up. Just go back 250 years. None of you would be here. In terms of lifespan, I am serious. Big Pharma's conspiracy to keep you alive. And yet, sometimes it's dark, you know? Oh, by the way, I forgot. This is my t-shirt. My daughter just got back from Southeast Asia. She spent a semester there, so she got me this shirt. She's pretty sure the earth is round. She flew over there. She brought me back this t-shirt to prove it. Okay, Obama's birth. Chemtrails, that's one I like a lot. Chemtrails. And those are the, you know, streaks in the sky from airplanes, and that's a special kind of chemical that the government is using to control the population. Yeah. How do you know? They're everywhere. I was just in Joshua Tree National Park, pristine environment filled with chemtrails. I'm sure the government was controlling what I thought and did out there. And let's stop there, all right? Because it just gets worse. And again, my question is, why are we like this? Because I would like to suggest that we're more attracted to these things than we like to admit. Because it's very hard to say, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to say, I'm not in possession of the truth and I'd like to find out more. It's hard. Because it means that you have to hold your own worldview loosely, with curiosity, with openness. You have to inquire. You have to. One of the things I like that Brene Brown says is, what story am I making up? That's such a great question. What story am I making up? I bet, since it was Thanksgiving, you came into Thanksgiving making up a lot of stories about your relatives. Okay? And about definitely you know what the meal is going to be like and so forth and so on. What story am I making up? I remember, by the way, one of my stories that I made up for a long time. Maybe I told you this, but it's worth repeating. So when I was a kid, my dad did a lot of traveling, and I had this like ongoing joke. We'd sit down for dinner, and I would ask, "Where's Dad?" "Oh, he's in Kansas City. And that just became like a running joke because he never told us where he went. Okay, he just was gone. And then we had to find out at dinner time until I had kids, and then my son, who we can say, no, my son, who we can tell repeatedly, hey, going to be gone on Friday of this week. When Friday comes, hey, where's Dad? Okay. So what story am I making up? Maybe I was told 100 times, hey, your dad's going to be gone, or my dad said I'm going to be gone. And it just didn't register because I didn't care, Like, all right. What story am I making up? It's hard. So I'm going to make some statements here. And you can run them through your own grid of truth. So here's my suggestion, that we construct elaborate fantasies because it's uncomfortable to be in the face of the unknown. I think if I could ask, what's the psychological motivation? We construct, and it's not just personally, because there can be a collective element to what gets constructed, because it's difficult to be in the face of the unknown. Really. Who loves just being in the place of the unknown? None of us. Really. That's my first point. Here's my second point. It's a survival strategy. It's a survival strategy. Because anytime we're confronted with the unknown, with ambiguity, with paradox, there's a reactive component that wants to put the world back together again. Say, I need it to make sense. And I will even construct elaborate theories to help contain what's being fragmented. Do you see how, on one level, let's take the earth as flat. How many have ever noticed that the earth is big? Okay. Even when you go up in an airplane, you're confronted with the vastness of the earth. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And we're only talking about the earth. We're not even into the solar system and out from there, but just the earth. And I'd like to suggest it's a relatively contemporary terror, because in the past, you were relatively landlocked mentally into your geographical region. That was the earth. Like in the Bible, it says that a flood covered the earth. Well, from their point of view, if there was a flood, it covered the earth. They had no sense of the globe. But from an existential point of view, just flying in an airplane kind of freaks you out. What is this place? And even in an airplane, it still looks flat. Now you might say, I see a slight curvature, but you're still like, I think I see a slight curvature. It could be the window of the airplane. I don't know. So just the sheer vastness A theory that says it's not as complicated as it appears is attractive. It's attractive. That's a conspiracy theory. It's not as complicated. It's actually terrifying to think that there is a worldview out there and people out there who train for years to try to destroy the symbolic hub of our society, meaning the Twin Towers and Washington, D.C., that people plotted for years and years to fly into the towers and bring in a sense, the symbol of our nation to its knees. For some reason, that is a kind of unknown territory. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what language they speak. It's easier to say it must have been an elaborate plan done from the inside, because just confronting the sheer terror of you are not in control of this world is terrifying. And start going down the list of theories, and they're psychologically, even though some of them are weird, it's psychologically like flying to the freaking moon. I'm amazed when I go over Lake Michigan and land in Chicago. But the idea that people would strap themselves in to a metal tube and fly into outer space is freaking nuts. And then they're going to launch off the metal tube and float down to a moon. That is absurd. You say, oh, it happened. It's still absurd. It's crazy. So it's easier to say, how much easier is it to say Stanley Kubrick and a conspiracy got together and filmed that frickin' thing in Nevada? Because I can understand that. Can't you? It wouldn't even be that hard, you know? After all, there are no stars. Look at the photos, you know? So anyway, my main point is it keeps the world small. And therefore, it keeps you safe. That's the definition of a survival strategy. If I can keep the world small, I can stay safe from the terror of the unknown. I'd like to make my third point. This has to do with the denial of death. Really, our own limitations, our own mortality, the smallness of our own minds. I'd rather avoid. A conspiracy theory is an elaborate denial of death. If I'm right, maybe I'm not going to die. I'm not saying people are conscious of this. I'm talking about the inner workings of our complicated psyches. One more point along these same lines. I think the era that we live in is terrifying from an existential point of view. We now know more information than we could ever possibly understand. We have access to more information, like those freaking questions. You know? I was starting to think this is a conspiracy because I think your nails grow more in the summer. I have proof of this because I have nails, I guess, and I've noticed that they grow. But apparently that's false, although we have to, really question the website here. And I'm pretty sure that entire list was fake news. Think about it. What's going on with my mic? Could be the battery, maybe. It's a conspiracy. It's the deep state. Once I said the word truth, they were listening, and now they're trying to mess with my microphone. So you know how it works. Anyway, we live with I think, a unique contemporary problem where we're continually confronted with the sheer size of the earth, with the sheer span of time, with the complicated nature of just being a human being that we evolved. I mean, that is freaky in and of itself. There's a 2-million-year-old person in you, something like that. Depends on how you do the math with these things. These are not easy to comprehend. You know what's easier to comprehend? That the earth is only 5,000 years old, and God created it, boom. And it's really not that old, because I can think about 5,000 years. That's the stretch, really. 6,000, 10,000 years. But you start going to 4.5 billion years, that's just the frickin' Earth. I don't even know what a billion is. I honestly do not know what a billion is. My mind does not even comprehend even 1 billion. Somebody will, well, I'll explain it to you afterwards. You don't know what it is either. You know what I'm saying? So I think one reason why all these conspiracy theories are on the rise is because we're continually confronted with existentially uncomfortable information about the unknown, how little we really know. Climate change is the same way. How can people deny climate change? Do you know how scary it is? To even think how we've been living as an industrial growth society is changing the climate, that's very scary. Who wants to believe that? It's just a big world, you know. I'm sure it will be fine. That's much more comfortable than to say, I don't know where the hell this ship is going. None of us do, not even the scientists. Read the book, The Uninhabitable Earth, which David Dean loaned to me, which is the scariest book I've ever read. And it's only dealing with possibilities. I know, it's the deep state again, coming after my mic. Okay, so I'm going to try to land the plane here, which is going around the Earth. So I'd like to say that part of growing up psychologically, and I might even say spiritually or psychospiritually, means an awakening to how little we grasp of what's true. It seems like it would be the opposite, that enlightenment would be coming into truth. But it has a kind of subtle paradox that coming to realize how little we know is part of growing up. It's part of growing. That's what open inquiry is about. That's one of our values. If you already know, there's no point. There's no point. You don't need to have open inquiry. I already know. There's a kind of humility that comes with, I might be wrong. I might be wrong. And I'm willing to listen. And I'm willing to dig. And I'm willing to listen to alternative perspectives. And I'm willing to wrestle, which is what the Rilke poem is about, which I'll quote here in a second. So, awakening to how little we grasp of what's true. And I was thinking, actually, as Patty was playing, it reminded me of the first song with the oracle for some reason. It reminded me of this line from Buddha. Now the deep state is really going to get going because I'm going to turn to Buddha here. Let's just listen to a little bit of ancient wisdom, because after all, the backdrop of this series is ancient virtues, modern values. Watch this. Can you turn? Deep state can't take me down. Do not believe in anything simply because you heard it. That's the Buddha. Do not believe in anything just because you heard it, unless you Googled it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything because it is found written in your religious books. Let me remind you, this is the Buddha. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your elders and teachers. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. To me, that's the backdrop of our modern value of open inquiry. It requires some humility and not just accepting everything that you've been handed, but beginning a process, I think that's what it is, of question, of doubt, of intrigue, of curiosity, which leads me to the final lines of Rilke's poem. When we win, it is with small things. I often think of this line in our political climate, which loves to win. And I just think of Rilke. When we win, it is with small things. And the triumph itself makes us small. What is extraordinary and eternal does not want to be bent by us. I mean the angel, or the mystery, I might add. I mean the angel who appeared to the wrestlers of the Old Testament. When the wrestlers' sinews grew long like metal strings, he felt them under his fingers like chords of deep music. Whoever was beaten by this angel, who often simply declined the fight, went away proud and strengthened, and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt this person. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. Do you feel that openness there? Are you willing to be defeated by even more of what's true? Opening yourself up to that possibility? I think that's what Rilke is luring us to in this poem. Thanks for listening.